I'd like to give a very quick thumbnail sketch of our route in order to put the rest of the video into context, and I'll only show the principal places we went to, omitting all of the numerous side trips we did, and I apologise in advance if I mispronounce any place names. So we started in Cape Town, we drove through to Stellenbosch, and we then drove around the wine growing area. And very nice it was too. And we stayed the night in Prince Alfred Hamlet. We then drove around the Cederberg and we rejoined Highway 7 at Citrusdal. We pushed on to Clanwilliam and spent a night or two at the campsite next to the dam there. But we were mindful of the time, we needed to push on, so without too many stops we then drove on up to Springbok and spent a couple of nights there. We then pushed on towards Namibia and we swung to the left, we went through to Port Nolloth, drove up the coast as far as Alexander Bay, and we then crossed over into Namibia at Oranjemund. And we stayed a couple of nights at the rather wonderful Op my Stoep Lodge, which was really very pleasant. Unfortunately, you aren't able to drive up to the north of Oranjemund because that goes through a diamond mining area and it's restricted. So we followed the road which goes alongside the Orange River for much of the way, up as far as Rosh Pina. And as I recall it, that's where the gravel section begins. And you have a long drive going up as far as Oz. And there's a very pleasant hotel and campsite where you can stay out there. From Oz, we continued on up north as far as Helmeringhausen. And from there, we took the road which goes alongside the Namib desert, and we went as far as a wonderful place called the Little Saucers campsite where we stayed for a few nights, and that was really very pleasant. We took the opportunity to go into Sesriem and then as far as Sossusvlei, where of course you have the massive dunes. From there we retraced our steps and we went to the rather eccentric Solitaire, where they have very famous roadhouse. And from there another long haul all the way through to Walvis Bay. A lot of the road was like this. Corrugated, deserty and fairly brutal. We found this little guy in the road and we took him to safety. And when you finally get to Walvis Bay, emerging from the desert, you feel that you reach civilization again. From Walvis Bay, we travelled up the coast as far as the very pleasant little town of Swakopmund. Unfortunately, we were stranded there for a couple of days because we had problems with the clutch. We had a very interesting day trip out of Swakopmund. We headed east to see the very eerie and very surreal moon landscape. We continued going up the coast as far as Walvis Bay. Now this area here is classed as the southern end of the Skeleton Coast, and it is indeed very eerie, and you will pass a few shipwrecks along the way. From there we swung inland and we went as far as the little community of Uis, and we found a very pleasant campsite to stay at. We continued going north. We passed the regional centre of Horithus, and we went as far as Kamanjab. Now Kamanjab acts as the regional centre, and it's also the last place where you can stock up and refuel before you go into Etosha. We did incidentally do a side trip over to the cheetah reserve, and I would strongly recommend that to anyone. We duly stocked up and refueled in Kamanjab, and we then travelled north up as far as the Golden Gate entrance to Etosha. We checked in and we drove up as far as our camp, which was the Olifantras camp. We stayed there for 3 nights and we travelled out around the park during subsequent days. We then pushed on to the east. We decided we'd probably spent enough time in the park, and we decided to exit, and we came out at the Anderson Gate. From the Anderson Gate we travelled down south. We went to the very pleasant little town of Oucho, and we stayed at a really wonderful camp called Etatongwe Lodge. We stayed there a couple of nights. We then pushed on down to the south, and we headed for the Waterberg game park. I have to say we found this a bit of a washout. We went up there, saw very little, but we were staying at a rather nice place called the Hamakari Guest Farm, and we saw a great deal more wildlife in their grounds. From there we pushed on down south, ending up at the capital, Windhoek. And we stayed at a very fine campsite called Urban Camp. When we'd finished in Windhoek, we travelled south as far as Rehoboth. We decided we wanted to see the famous Gamsberg Pass, and so we cut off to the west. We spent a few nights out there in some very isolated camps. We then went through as far as the track we had taken previously, that time travelling north. We went down as far as Solitaire again. You do incidentally across the Tropic of Capricorn around here. From Solitaire we cut off down to the southeast, down as far as Maltahohe, and then over to Marienthal. Now near to Marienthal there's a Jan-Apr dam, and we went in there, and the area around the reservoir is really very peaceful, very well worthwhile visiting. There is incidentally also a game park there, although there's very little game. We were told there were just 3 ostriches there, and I think that's what we saw. However, to compensate, we found a very nice place to stay called the River Chalets. From Marienthal we took the main road going south. We passed through the regional centre of Keetmanshoop. We continued south and we pulled off and stayed at the Goebib Mountain Lodge. And this is a really excellent campsite. We stayed there a couple of days and then we continued. We went through Grunau. I must say not very much happens there except for having crossroads. And we then swung west to go to the Fish River Canyon. We called in at the rather eccentric Canyon Road house where they have a collection of old cars. And see the Fish River Canyon. You go through Hobas and as far as the viewpoint. We then retraced our steps. We headed south towards Ice and we went down as far as Osenkere. Now this is a bit of an oasis in the desert. They have irrigation from the Orange River and they have extensive vineyards. We stayed in the Norwich-Armour River Resort, another excellent campsite with a very good restaurant attached. Unfortunately, we had to stay in Osenkere for the best part of a week. I had a recurrence of the clutch problems and there's very little support available around there. I had to make a couple of journeys by taxi down into Springbok in order to buy parts, a round trip of about 250 kilometres. Anyhow, I fixed the problem, we got going again. We crossed the border at Noorderweer. And from then on, we had to retrace our steps to Cape Town. We stopped along the way, our last night camping, to the north of Clanwilliam, a great campsite called Highlanders, which is based on a vineyard. In the morning, I had a puncture repair caused by a long thorn, only my second of the trip. And all of a sudden, the trip is over. We lost nearly a month at the start owing to shipping delays and we weren't able to get everywhere we wanted to, so we decided to leave the vehicle in storage and we'll come back later in the year to finish off. Bye bye for now.